The rooftop glittered like a crown above the sleepless city, its lights scattering like 1,000 coins tossed carelessly into the dark. Guests in diamonds and black ties clinked glasses, their laughter sharp and shallow, rising and falling like music played on fragile glass. The Parker name hung over the party like a banner: wealth, power, inevitability. Nathan Parker himself stood at the balcony's edge, a silhouette of precision. His suit was razor sharp, his shoes glowed in the light, and his expression, as always, betrayed nothing. He stared at the street below, where cars crawled like ants, and he felt the familiar dullness creep in. Victories meant nothing now. The thrill had long since drained from the act of crushing competitors or buying loyalty. For Nathan, people were contracts, and contracts were trophies. He had always said, everything has a price. But tonight, even that creed rang hollow. Michael Carter, an old companion from his reckless 20s, sidled up with a wineglass in hand and a smile that was half dare, half mockery. "You're bored," he said, his tone sing-song. "Boredom doesn't suit you, Nathan. Let's make it interesting." Nathan arched a brow, his indifference carefully polished. "Interesting?" Michael gestured toward the sidewalk. $2 million. That's the wager. You see her?" Nathan followed the point. At the edge of the glow cast by the street lamp sat a woman. She was young, though life had carved its years harshly into her face. A worn coat swallowed her thin frame, her feet were bare against the pavement, and beside her sat a plastic cup with only a few coins rattling inside. A piece of cardboard rested against her knees. Anything helps. Emily. Though Nathan didn't yet know her name, he couldn't ignore the eyes. Blue-gray, sharp and unblinking, they carried no plea, no shame. They faced the world as though she dared it to look back at her. "Make her your wife," Michael continued, swirling his drink. 3 months. Keep her by your side, make her presentable, make her yours. Do that and the money's yours. Fail, and I take the win. The corner of Nathan's mouth twitched in something like amusement. A bet, a game, a challenge. Finally, something with stakes that weren't already decided. $2 million? He said smoothly. "You underestimate me, Michael. Consider it done." Minutes later, the millionaire descended from the glittering tower into the grittier air of the street. His polished shoes made no sound on the pavement as he approached. Emily tensed, shrinking into her coat, but when her eyes met his, she didn't look away. "Food, clothes, a roof over your head," Nathan said, his voice low, deliberate, velvet over steel. "In return, you marry me. 3 months. That's all." Emily blinked once, then laughed bitterly, the sound rasping from her throat. "That's not an offer. That's madness." "It's a contract," Nathan corrected, leaning closer. "You'll be compensated, more than you've dreamed." Her hunger gnawed at her, but she raised her chin. "And if you decide I bore you after a week, what then? You toss me back on the curb?" Nathan's jaw tightened, though his tone never shifted. "You'll have it in writing. Every clause, every condition. No intimacy required, a separate room, payment secured in escrow. All you'll need to do is stand by my side." Emily studied him with the wary defiance of a cornered wolf. He expected fear, maybe desperation. Instead, she met him with sarcasm and suspicion, the last weapons she owned. 3 months, you say? You talk like you're buying a season pass." He didn't flinch. 3 months, decide now." The cold pressed around her like a cage. Her stomach burned with hunger. The street offered no mercy. Against every instinct, she nodded once, sharp as a blade. "Fine, but don't think for a second I'm grateful." Within the hour, a sleek black car carried them to the city's most exclusive hotel. Marble, chandeliers, silence. Emily walked through it like she was trespassing on another world. In the suite, she devoured the food placed before her while Nathan poured himself whiskey, studying her like she was an equation. He slid a folder across the table. She read every word, every line of the contract. No intimacy clause, separate room, escrowed money, guarantees signed and sealed. Her fingers didn't tremble when she took the pen and signed. The next morning, under the dull hum of courthouse fluorescence, the judge muttered the vows with all the energy of reading a grocery list. Nathan placed a ring on Emily's finger, its weight cold, unfeeling. The ceremony was over in minutes, their union bound by ink and legality. Outside, cameras clicked for no one. There were no guests, no flowers, no smiles. Nathan guided her into the waiting car, his hand firm at her back. He looked ahead, already moving on to his next calculation. Emily, however, turned her gaze to the city flashing by the windows, neon streaks across glass. For the first time since they'd met, her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Before midnight," she said evenly. I need to see the locked room in your mansion. Nathan's composure flickered. He didn't ask how she knew. He didn't answer at all. He only looked at her, caught between annoyance and unease. No one mentioned that room. Yet somehow this woman, this so-called beggar, had stepped into his world and demanded access to its most secret corner. And with that, the bet stopped feeling like a game. For the first time in years, Nathan Parker felt something money couldn't buy: the slow, sharp edge of suspense. The Parker mansion rose like a fortress of marble and glass against the darkening sky, its windows glowing faintly as though guarding secrets no one was meant to touch. Emily sat rigid in the car as the wrought iron gates swung open, revealing a long driveway lined with perfect rows of trimmed hedges and statues that glared like silent sentinels. She had imagined luxury before, but this was something else, a place where money had turned into stone, into power, into silence. Inside, the house swallowed her whole. The foyer was vast, echoing with the click of her worn shoes against polished marble. Chandeliers glittered above her head, paintings of stern-faced ancestors lined the walls, and at the center, Nathan Parker stood as though he belonged not just to the house, but to every piece of it. He gestured casually to a maid. "Prepare a room for Mrs. Parker," he ordered, his voice cool and impersonal. Emily felt the weight of the title settle on her shoulders like chains. Mrs. Parker. It was supposed to mean privilege, respect, belonging, but here, it sounded like ownership. Dinner was served in a dining room so long she could barely see the far end of the table. Nathan sat across from her, his eyes hidden behind the flicker of the chandelier. Silverware clinked softly, but no words filled the space. Finally, Emily broke the silence, her tone sharp. "You didn't marry a doll, Nathan. If you want silence, eat with your statues." For the first time he looked up, the faintest curve tugging at his lips. "So you do have teeth," he said, almost amused. But there was something unreadable in his gaze, something that unnerved her more than his arrogance. Later, when he escorted her down the endless hallways to the room prepared for her, Emily stopped suddenly. The air shifted, colder, heavier. To her left stood a door, plain, unadorned, its handle dulled with age. Unlike the rest of the house, which sparkled with wealth, this door looked forgotten, almost forbidden. She didn't know why, but her heart quickened. Nathan noticed where she was looking. His jaw tightened. "That room is off limits," he said curtly, and moved to guide her forward. But Emily didn't move. She stared at the door, then back at him. "What's in there?" "Nothing that concerns you." His voice was flat, too fast. Emily narrowed her eyes, the storm in them flashing. "You paid for 3 months of my life, Nathan, not my curiosity. If you think you can keep me as some silent ornament, you chose the wrong girl." He stepped closer, towering over her, his voice low. "There are things in this house you're not ready to know." She didn't flinch. "Then you'd better make me ready, because I'll find out either way." The air between them crackled, charged with something dangerous, something far more powerful than the contract they had signed. For a moment, Nathan almost looked unsettled, as though this woman, this so-called beggar, had already pierced a wall he had spent years building. That night, Emily lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling as the chandelier above cast fractured shadows across the walls. She thought about the locked room, about the way Nathan's voice had faltered when he spoke of it. Whatever lay behind that door wasn't just furniture or dust. It was something alive, something heavy enough to make a man like Nathan and Parker flinch. And Emily, no matter the cost, intended to uncover it. For Nathan, the game had begun as a bet, a performance to prove his power. But already the pieces were shifting. Emily wasn't playing by his rules. She wasn't afraid, and worse, she was looking straight at the one place he never wanted anyone to look. The mansion, with all its glittering walls and locked corridors, had become a battlefield, and neither of them had any idea how much the next move would change everything. The following morning broke with a chill that seeped through the Parker mansion's glass walls, and though the sun painted the gardens gold, Emily felt only the cold weight of her new life. She sat at the breakfast table in silence, the silver cutlery laid out before her like weapons she didn't know how to wield. Across the expanse of polished mahogany, Nathan read the newspaper as though nothing in the world could touch him. But Emily's eyes drifted to the memory of the locked door from last night, the one he had forbidden her to enter. It burned at the edges of her thoughts, sharper than hunger, stronger than fear. Her solitude didn't last. Before long, a small army descended. Stylists, etiquette coaches, a woman with a voice sharp enough to cut stone who insisted on correcting Emily's posture with every step. Chin up, shoulders back, no slouching. Emily bit back sarcasm, enduring the endless fittings and endless instructions. Silk gowns draped her body, jewels sparkled at her throat, but none of it felt like hers. Every stitch was Nathan's way of turning her into something he could parade. Still, she refused to surrender. Between the endless lessons, she whispered to the maids, asked their names, learned their stories. They were surprised. No one in this house ever asked. For Emily, those small acts of defiance became a reminder that she wasn't here to be molded. She was here to survive, and to learn what secrets Nathan kept locked away. By evening, Nathan summoned her for a test. A dinner, he said, his tone clipped. Private, but important. Consider it your first trial. The restaurant was the kind of place where even the air seemed expensive. Crystal chandeliers cast a glow over tables filled with polished faces, laughter too loud, smiles too sharp. Emily, in an emerald gown chosen by Nathan's stylists, felt their eyes rake over her, measuring, judging. She gripped the strap of her dress to keep her hands from trembling. Nathan leaned toward her, voice low. Relax, you're doing fine. His words caught her off guard, not because they were kind, they weren't, but because they lacked the cold precision she'd come to expect. For the first time, she heard something almost human. The dinner passed in a blur of courses and conversation, Emily's quick wit slipping through despite her nerves. Once, a man at the table made a cruel joke about the beggar bride. Emily met his eyes and with calm steel said, "Better a beggar than a man who can't buy dignity with all his millions." The table fell silent. Nathan's lips curved in something dangerously close to pride. But the night's triumph was short-lived. Back at the mansion, Emily wandered the halls, restless. She slipped into Nathan's study, the firelight flickering across shelves of leather-bound volumes and stacks of contracts. On the desk lay a scatter of papers, ordinary at first glance, but as she skimmed, her blood ran cold. It was a series of messages, printed emails, blunt and careless. Has she agreed? On. I read. Yes, it's only a matter of time before I win, came Nathan's reply. Her stomach clenched. It was true. The bet wasn't just a whisper between men. It was documented, deliberate, cruelly indifferent. She clutched the papers, fury and humiliation burning through her veins. The door creaked open. Nathan stepped inside, his face shadowed, his tie loosened from the long night. He froze when he saw the papers in her hands. For a moment, silence reigned, heavy as thunderclouds. What are you doing? His voice was low, taut with tension. Emily's eyes blazed. Reading the truth. To you, I'm nothing but a bet. A joke to win money. Nathan moved forward quickly, hand outstretched, but Emily pulled back, clutching the evidence to her chest. Answer me, she demanded, her voice trembling with rage. His jaw tightened. It's not that simple. She laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and broken. It's exactly that simple. You toyed with my life like it was a game. For the first time since she had met him, Nathan faltered. His posture softened, his eyes flickered with something she couldn't quite place. But it was too late. Emily shoved the papers against his chest and stormed past him, her footsteps echoing like gunshots down the hallway. In her room, she packed what little she had, a few clothes, the pendant she still kept hidden, her pride, and flung the window open. The trellis that climbed the mansion's walls was covered in roses, their thorns sharp, but she didn't care. One by one, she lowered herself, scraping her hands, tearing her dress, her breath coming ragged in the cold night air. When her feet hit the ground, she didn't look back. Nathan reached the study window just in time to see her figure vanish into the darkness. A strange, unfamiliar panic surged in his chest. He had lost control. For a man who believed everything had a price, he realized, for the first time, that to trust in dignity could not be bought. Out in the streets, Emily walked fast, clutching her bag against her chest, the city swallowing her. But the words burned in her mind, the proof in her hands like a brand. She had been nothing more than a pawn. Fury gave her strength, but beneath it, her heart cracked with something worse. Betrayal. And somewhere behind her, Nathan Parker stood alone in his silent mansion, feeling the walls close in. For the first time in years, the game he had designed was slipping out of his hands. Emily had escaped, and she had taken his certainty with her. Night peeled back into a gray, reluctant dawn as Emily crossed the city on foot. The streets were slick from a weak, indecisive rain. Bus stops steamed with the breath of early commuters. Shopkeepers lifted rattling shutters like eyelids forced awake. Every step jarred her bones. The adrenaline that had carried her down the rose-tangled trellis turned to sand inside her veins. She wrapped her coat tighter, breath clouding in front of her, fingers aching from cold and thorn scratches. Cars hissed past. No one looked twice. She had learned long ago how easily a person could vanish in plain sight. Her thoughts ran in loops, vicious and fast. Has she agreed? Yes, it's only a matter of time before I win. Those words burned behind her eyes like after-images from lightning. Fury had felt clean in the study. Out here it curdled into a feverish ache. She reached the subway and sank onto a bench, barely noticing the advertisements staring down at her with perfect, impossible faces. The tiles had that hospital shine, and the smell, iron and disinfectant, pulled old memories from the dark. Waiting rooms, social workers with clipped voices, another life in which she'd asked for help and been given pamphlets. She laughed once, too hard, at nothing. The sound frightened her. A man shuffled over, offered a paper cup of tea from a thermos. "You la-mos. Oak like you need this, miss." She swallowed a thank you with the heat, the sweetness hitting her empty stomach like a fist. When the tea was gone, her hands shook. The station blurred, the world slanting as if the platform were tilting toward the tracks. She tried to stand and couldn't. A cool hand touched her forehead. Someone muttered, "She's burning up." Footsteps, a call placed, siren-thin echoes. Then the world narrowed to a single fluorescent line and went out. By the time Nathan found the subway, the morning had become bright and cruel. Panic bucked under his ribs, raw and unfamiliar, an animal with no leash. He had moved through crises like a blade through water all his life, decisive, efficient, untouched. But Emily's absence had torn a seam in him he didn't know he had. He drove without a destination, then with far too many. Shelters, soup kitchens, alleys where outreach vans idled with back doors open like mouths. He showed her picture on his phone when he had to. He heard himself say please to strangers. He didn't recognize his own voice. In a doorway off 8th, a woman with a knitted cap and careful eyes looked once at the photo and then at him. "Hospital on Ridge. They brought a girl in an hour ago. Fever like a house on fire." Her gaze sharpened. "If you're bad news, turn around now." He opened his mouth to speak and found no defense worth voicing, only a quiet, "Thank you." That sounded like confession. The ER was a chorus of beeps and low-voiced urgency. Specialists glided on rubber soles. Nathan stood at the intake desk and said Emily's name. The nurse's eyes flickered with the guarded compassion of someone who has been lied to 1,000 times. "She's stable. We're hydrating her. Fever's high." He asked if he could see her. The nurse looked at the ring on his finger, then at his face, weighing something he couldn't guess. "You can sit," she said, in Ollie, nodding toward a curtained bay. "Don't wake her if she's sleeping." Behind the curtain, Emily lay small and too still under stale blankets, an IV sliding clear liquid into the back of her hand. Her hair stuck to her temples in damp curls. Fever had painted her cheeks high and bright and left her mouth pale. The sight cut him so neatly he didn't feel the edge, only the warm spread of hurt after. He pulled a chair close, not touching the bed, and sat. His suit wrinkled. He didn't notice. He waited. Hours loosened and ran together. He refused coffee because it meant leaving. He refused to make calls because the words would sound like distance. When a nurse came to check the beeping monitor, Emily stirred, the faintest wince. He flinched as if struck. "Sir?" the nurse said softly. "She'll wake when she's ready. If your family—" He swallowed. Family sounded like theft. "I'm here because I should be." The nurse's gaze softened. "Then be here," she said, and moved on. When he could no longer stand the helplessness, he did what he understood. He dragged the rotten root into light. In the corridor, he called his lawyer. "Draft it," he said, voice hoarse. "A termination of the wager, immediate. Language that cedes any claim, returns all funds, binds me from ever initiating any similar thing." The word bet tasted like rust. "Attach proof of transfer, the money goes back to him." He paused, and then matched that sum to the shelter at 34th, the one with the art room, in her name, anonymous from me. "Michael won't accept a public humiliation," his lawyer warned. "I'm not offering him a negotiation," Nathan said. "I'm mailing him a receipt." He hung up and opened the Notes app on his phone. Then, dissatisfied with the sterile glow of letters trapped in glass, he asked a nurse for paper. She handed him a clipboard with a smile that said, "I don't do this often." He wrote to Emily with a pen that caught on cheap fiber, ink blotting in pea laces where his hand slowed. "I did what I did because I could." That sentence had always been a victory before. Today it's a confession. "I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not asking anything of you. I'm writing this because I don't trust my voice to tell the truth while it's still learning how. I have canceled the bet. The money is gone. It's yours to decide how it's repurposed. Not to clear my conscience. That would be another purchase. Because you were right about what dignity costs. I can't give you back last night. I can't give you back the years before. I can give you proof. I will keep giving it quietly until proof is habit." He signed his name so small it looked like a footnote. When he looked up, the curtain had moved a fraction. Emily's eyes were slivered open, fever-dazed but present, watching the motion of his hand. Carefully, like approaching a skittish animal, he set the clipboard on the bedside table and slid the chair back an inch. "You don't have to read it," he said. "It's there." Her lips trembled once with a dryness that made sound a labor. "Paper burns," she whispered. "People lie." "Yes," he said. "I have, and it did." He drew a breath that scraped. "Let me prove it without asking you to believe it first." Her eyes drifted shut. The monitor kept time. He sat and learned the rhythm of her breathing till the body remembered it, as if his lungs could be trained to match hers. He dozed and woke and dozed again to the ER's electric heartbeat. By afternoon, a resident with ink-smudged fingers and kind exhaustion in his posture explained the labs. "Dehydration, infection brewing, but we caught it. Antibiotics in, fluids in, fever should break by tonight." He glanced at Nathan's tie, then back at the clipboard. "You staying?" "I am," Nathan said. The resident nodded, curiosity satisfied. When Emily woke again, it was with a soft, angry cough. The room was dimming into the half-light between shifts. She saw the letter, then Nathan, then the IV. Her fingers twitched as if to pull it free. He shook his head once, slow. "Please, let it work." Her gaze was wary and sharp even through the fever. "Why are you here?" She coughed. The sound cut him. "Because," he said, "leaving you in pain and doing nothing would turn me into exactly what you said I was, and because I don't want to be that anymore." "You don't get to decide what you are by saying it," she rasped. "I know." He opened his hands on his knees. "Then let me decide by what I do." Silence drew a tight circle around the bed. The beep softened into the background, like rain behind glass. Emily studied him with the patience of someone who has learned that time exposes more truth than speech. At last, she nodded once. A verdict. Temporary, provisional, not unkind. "Terms," she said, voice threadbare. "No touching, no press, no gestures for show, no we. You show up, quietly, for other people, for months, and none of it buys anything from me." He absorbed each word as if they were blows and blessings both. "Yes," he said, "all of it, yours to change, or keep, or end." A nurse came with broth in a paper cup that smelled like garlic and home. Emily accepted it with two shaky hands. Nathan didn't move to help. He watched the steam drift and tried not to cry at a woman drinking soup. When she finished, when her eyelids slid down and stayed down, he took the empty cup and held it like a reliquary. Paper rustled at the curtain. Michael slipped in with a grin too bright for an ER. "You're a hard man to reach," he whispered, then saw Emily, saw the IV, and turned the grin into a smirk, which was worse. "Don't tell me the game's gone soft." Nathan staws. So fast the chair kicked back. "The bet is over." Michael's eyebrows went up. The gesture said liar and prove it. Nathan reached into his jacket and produced the envelope the courier had dropped off not an hour ago. Notarized rescission, bank wire confirmations, legal language sharp enough to draw blood. He handed it over. "Your $2 million is back. Double goes to a shelter. In her name. There won't be a gala. There won't be anything. If you leak what you printed, you'll look like a man who kept gambling after the table was turned over." Michael scanned the pages, delight draining from his face. "You're serious." "I'm busy," Nathan said, and for once the words did not mean I'm above you. They meant there is something more important than you. He angled his body so that even their posture said leave. "This conversation is over." Michael's eyes skittered to Emily's sleeping face, to the bruised half-moons under her eyes. Some sliver of shame or opportunism, hard to tell which, made him tuck the papers into his coat and retreat. "You're not fun anymore," he murmured. "Good," Nathan said. He sat back down. Night slid in fully. The fever broke close to midnight, a slow surrender that dampened Emily's hairline and softened the tight lines at her mouth. Nathan slept in the chair with his spine scolding him and didn't complain. In the early hours when the ward was soft with snores and whispered orders, Emily waked enough to turn her head, to see him curled awkwardly, his hand hovering near hers but not touching, as if he were teaching himself the complicated art of restraint. She watched him for a long moment, long enough to recognize the cost of stillness in a man who had only ever moved forward. She exhaled, a sound too small to be forgiveness, too real to be indifference. Then she closed her eyes. By morning, the ER light had the pale color of mercy. The resident returned with a discharge plan and a list of antibiotics. "You'll need a few days real rest," he said to Emily. "A real place to sleep." Emily's gaze slid to Nathan, not a question, not an invitation, simply a calculus. He did not rush into the silence. You'll go where you choose, he said. If you want a hotel key, I'll put it in your hand and not follow. If you want home, you'll set the conditions and I'll put my name under them. And if you want me gone, I'll step back and send what you need through people who won't say my name. Her mouth twitched in the direction of a smile, the kind that had teeth. You practiced that, she murmured. All night, he admitted. She considered. The hospital beeped in patient counterpoint. Finally, she said, I'll come back, for rest, not for you. Noted, he said, and the word sounded strangely like gratitude. They rode in silence, the city newly washed by rain, every puddle a pale coin. At a red light, Nathan touched his jacket pocket, feeling the sharp corners of the rescission papers and, beneath them, the delicate weight of a small butterfly pendant he had taken from the locked room and carried with him to the ER without letting himself wonder why. He would not give it to her today. He would not give her anything she had not asked for. When the mansion gates opened, he felt less like a king returning to a kingdom and more like a student arriving late to class, unprepared and full of resolve. He led her not to the grand bedroom with its theater curtain bed, but to a smaller room on the garden side where dawn came in gentle and the walls didn't echo. He placed the hotel key on the dresser anyway. He placed a folded copy of the legal rescission beside it. He placed nothing else. At the threshold, Emily turned. Terms stand, she said. He nodded. They do. She watched him for a heartbeat longer, as if measuring whether this new man would hold his shape when she was not looking. Satisfied for now, she shut the door. Nathan stood in the corridor, the house breathing around him, the locked room at the end of the hall like a shadow he would have to learn to open. He let his head fall back against the wall and closed his eyes. The old life shrugged its shoulders and tried to settle back onto him. He did not let it. Downstairs, the staff moved quietly, their eyes curious and brighter than yesterday. Somewhere beyond the hedges, a butterfly lifted from a wet rose and went looking for sun. The gala glittered like a cathedral to excess. Chandeliers swayed overhead, scattering light like shards of broken stars, and the air itself shimmered with perfume and money. Nathan Parker stood at the entrance, tuxedo crisp, eyes unreadable. On his arm, Emily moved with quiet strength in a simple navy gown, chosen not by stylists, but by herself. She did not gleam like the other women in diamonds and sequins. She carried something rarer, sharper, the dignity of a survivor. People noticed. They whispered. They stared. The evening had been engineered to test her. Michael Carter prowled somewhere in the crowd, carrying secrets like knives. He had promised to expose everything, the bet, the humiliation, the marriage as wager. Nathan knew the man's appetite for spectacle. Michael would not settle for rumor. He wanted blood in the water. At first, the evening moved smoothly. Speeches rose and fell. Waiters slipped between tables with silver trays. Emily smiled politely, deflected probing questions with wit that made Nathan's chest ache. She belonged here more than anyone else, though she never pretended to. But beneath the polished surface, the tension thickened. Every tick of the clock pulled them closer to Michael's ambush. And then it happened. Michael appeared on stage, microphone in hand, smile sharp as glass. Ladies and gentlemen, he purred, we all know Nathan Parker is a man of vision, but did you know his latest project began as a little game, a little bet? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras lifted like drawn swords. Nathan rose from his chair slowly, his movements deliberate, his pulse pounding. He crossed the room and mounted the stage. The lights were hot on his skin. He took the microphone from Michael with a grip that brokered no argument. It's true, Nathan said. His voice rang out steady but heavy. Months ago, I married Emily for money. A cruel joke, a dare. Murmurs exploded, but he raised a hand and silenced them. But what began as arrogance became something I couldn't have planned. This woman changed me. She showed me my reflection, and I hated what I saw, so I tore it down. He held up a thick envelope and waved to the cameras. Here are the legal documents. The bet is canceled. The money is gone, returned and doubled, redirected to a shelter in her name. Not for me, for her, for them. The crowd erupted, some in disbelief, some in stunned applause. Michael stood frozen, color draining from his face. Emily stepped onto the stage, her voice clear as glass breaking. Money buys attention, remorse should be silent. But tonight, I'll speak for those who never had a microphone. We don't need saviors who buy us gowns or cages disguised as mansions. We need people who listen, who stay, who show up when it's ugly. Her words cut through the room, slicing past the glitter to land on raw nerves. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then a ripple of clapping, hesitant at first, building into thunder. Not for Nathan, but for her. Michael slipped away, humiliated, devoured by the very crowd he'd tried to manipulate. Nathan didn't chase him. He didn't need to. His war was not with Michael anymore. It was with himself. Back at the mansion later that night, Nathan placed the butterfly pendant in Emily's palm. "It's always been yours," he whispered. He did not ask for forgiveness. He asked for nothing. Emily looked down at the delicate piece of silver, then back at him. In her eyes burned both fury and something softer, fragile as dawn. "Actions," she said quietly. "Only actions." He nodded. For once, words were not his weapon. They were his vow. That night, Emily lay awake in her own room, the pendant warm against her chest. She could still hear the echo of her own voice through the speakers, still see the faces of the crowd. The game was over, yes, but a bigger gamble had just begun. Whether Nathan Parker's transformation was real, or just another mask he'd learned to wear. Down the hall, Nathan sat alone in his study, staring at the rescission papers scattered across his desk. For the first time in his life, he felt stripped bare. No armor of wealth, no shield of arrogance. Just a man who had traded power for truth and wasn't sure if the world or Emily would ever let him forget what he'd once been. But deep inside, something shifted. Not victory, not even relief. Something quieter, deeper, the first stirrings of hope. The morning after the gala arrived quiet, but not peaceful. The Parker Mansion's gardens glistened from a night of rain, their roses heavy with droplets, bending like dancers bowing after a performance. Emily walked among them in silence, her gown from the night before replaced by something simpler, yet her mind still carried the echoes of the crowd, the gasps, the applause, the words she had hurled into a room full of predators in gowns and tuxedos. She had spoken for herself, for those invisible women she once sat beside on cold sidewalks. And for the first time, she had felt the air change when people actually listened. But silence brought doubt. Standing under the old oak tree at the edge of the garden, Emily thought, can people like Nathan truly change, or do they just build prettier cages? She heard footsteps behind her. Nathan. His presence, once suffocating, now felt like a shadow waiting for permission to step into light. He carried no papers, no contracts, no champagne glass. Just himself, shoulders tense as though bracing for another battle. "Emily," he said, his voice stripped of polish, "I need to ask you something. You told me to show you with actions, not words. But I need to know, have I moved even an inch closer to your trust?" Emily turned slowly. His eyes were not the cold steel she had first known. They were raw, tired, desperate in a way he probably hated. She could feel her heart pull and resist at once. "You've changed," she admitted. "But change isn't trust. Trust is slower." He nodded, accepting the knife she had pressed against his chest. Then, to her shock, Nathan dropped to one knee on the damp grass. From his pocket, he pulled a small velvet box, the kind that in other hands might have meant control, transaction, glittering spectacle. He opened it. Inside lay a simple diamond ring, elegant but unpretentious. "Emily Clark," he said, his voice breaking the hush of the morning. "Will you marry me? Not because of a contract, not because of a bet, but because I love you. Because you've made me see that love is the only currency worth keeping." Her breath caught. Images rushed through her. The subway bench, her fever burning, his figure slumped in a hospital chair, the study with the ugly words printed in black and white, the pendant in her hand. Tears pricked her eyes, not with surrender but with the unbearable weight of choice. She whispered, "Nathan," and the sound was both warning and yearning. For a long heartbeat, the garden itself seemed to listen. The breeze hushed, the roses hung still. Emily lowered her eyes to the ring, then back to his face. She saw no arrogance there, only a man stripped bare. Finally she nodded. "Yes." Relief broke over him like a storm, and he slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled. They embraced under the oak tree, not as millionaire and beggar, but as two souls reshaped by pain. But the story did not end with a kiss. Weeks later, they married in the garden, this time with flowers that smelled of earth, not money. The guest list was small, no investors, no predators, only friends from shelters, colleagues from the community projects, and staff from the mansion who had once whispered about the beggar bride. Nathan spoke vows that made his voice shake. "You taught me love is not possession, but patience. You taught me that I was never strong until I chose to be kind." Emily's response was clear and steady. You destroyed me once, but you built me no illusions. You earned this with your hands, not your wealth. I choose to walk beside you because I believe people can change, but only if they never stop proving it. Their kiss was not for cameras but for themselves, witnessed by the quiet applause of people who knew the truth. Yet the morning after their wedding, Emily placed a folded piece of paper in Nathan's hands. His mother's handwriting, delicate but firm. He froze, recognizing it instantly. Emily explained softly, "She gave this to me years ago, when I worked at the hospice. She said you weren't ready yet. I waited, Nathan. I waited until I believed you might be." He unfolded it with trembling hands. The letter read, "If you are reading this, my son, it means you've chosen love over pride. I left behind a trust, locked behind 3 conditions. Admit your mistakes publicly, return what was never rightfully yours, and place part of your fortune in the hands of someone who will guard it, not as treasure, but as service. If you have met these conditions, then the trust doubles and becomes the seed of something greater, a foundation to heal what I could not protect you from." Nathan read the words aloud, his voice breaking. The letter ended with one final line. "Follow the butterfly, Nathan. It will never lead you to gold, only to grace." Tears blurred his vision. He had returned the money. He had admitted the ugliness. And now, with Emily standing before him, her hand steady on his shoulder, he knew he had fulfilled the third, entrusting power to someone who would wield it with compassion. In that moment, Nathan Parker signed away 25% of his company's dividends to a foundation Emily would oversee. The pen scratched across the page, loud as thunder in the silence of the room. When he set it down, he felt lighter than he had ever been. Emily leaned close, whispering, "This was never about saving me. It was about saving yourself." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Then I'm grateful you didn't walk away when you should have." Years passed. The Parker Foundation rose, a beacon of hope. Shelters grew into schools, kitchens into community centers. Emily's art-filled gallery halls, each piece auctioned to feed another family, build another roof. Nathan, once a man who believed everything had a price, became a man who learned the priceless value of humility. And in the nursery of the mansion-turned-home, their daughter Grace slept beneath the watch of a silver butterfly pendant that now hung above her crib. One night, as Emily and Nathan stood together watching her breathe, Nathan Wobidiwon whispered, "You've changed my life in ways I never imagined." Emily rested her head on his shoulder. "And you've shown me that even in the ugliest places, love can bloom." The mansion no longer felt like a cage. It was alive now, with laughter, with purpose, with redemption written into every corner. And though shadows of the past lingered, the butterfly had landed. Not on gold, on grace.